We had a last-minute dropout, so Marc Moss has lived in Missoula, Montana for 15 years. He is the founder of Tell Us Something. Please welcome Marc Moss. Thanks. Wow, so nervous. I really am nervous. In January of 2011, I was starting to learn how Twitter works, and I'm still trying to figure that out, if anyone wants to teach me. But a guy named Patrick Dugans, I wish I remember what his handle was. I think it's Pat Dugans, at Pat Dugans. He was gathering groups of people to share true personal stories on the stage over at the Badlander. And he was calling his event Missoula Moth. And I have been a public speaker for most of my adult life. I was a teacher in Ohio for a while. I was a park ranger in Yellowstone National Park and gave presentations to large groups of tourists, visitors. And I was a salesman for a while, and so I'm used to speaking in public, but I've never told my own story before. In fact, I thought I didn't have a story, but I signed up anyway to be a part of Missoula Moth that night in January. And I asked Pat if it was okay if I told my dad's story about how he met and fell in love with my mom in the first person as if I was my dad. Because it was a story I knew I wouldn't fuck up because I had grown up hearing it so many times. And he said, well, I guess you could try that. Because it was the first time and he needed storytellers, and so I did it. And I got really drunk because I was really nervous, and that is the number one thing to not do. Okay? I'm here to tell you, do not get drunk and try to tell a story. It's a bad idea. But I pulled it off. And it was the first time as an adult that I felt listened to and heard. Because they were listening to me, not what I was saying about geothermal pools and calderas and do you want to buy a portrait package or any of that. That was one of my jobs. I'll tell that story someday. And I fell in love with it. I felt empowered. I felt confident. I felt loved. And I wanted to do it again, sober this time. So Pat was somehow insanely doing this monthly. And the bar was full, and the bar was quiet. He also didn't have a theme, he didn't vet his storytellers, and he didn't have a time limit. So the stories sometimes went on for a really long time. And the Amsterdam story, right? I went to Amsterdam. It was awesome. I don't have any idea or any details as to why it was awesome, but I'm going to tell you that it was awesome for 20 minutes. Like, there were stories like that. But, so, in February, I told a story about finding a dildo in a bush on my way to work. And I'm driving down the road, and wait, what? And I had two jobs at the time. I worked in a funeral home during the day, and I washed dishes at a restaurant similar to Ruby's Cafe at night. And so the next morning, after I got out of the funeral home, I grabbed some gloves and a bag. And I was driving along, and I'm hoping that it's still there, and it was. But that is a different story. The following month, I told a story about quitting a job, and in April, I told a story, I can't remember what it was about. And then Missoula Moth ended. And I thought, we should keep this going. And I spoke to some of the other storytellers, and they said, yeah, we should keep this going. This is great. And I said, when are we going to do it again? And no one returned my emails or answered my phone calls. And so I just kind of just thought it was going to be the end of it. And so the art museum, Missoula Art Museum, called Patrick Dugans, who now lives in Bozeman, and said, hey, we want you to do Missoula Moth at the art museum for Artini. And Pat said, you know, Mark really likes this. I don't live in your town anymore. You should call Mark. And so they did. And I said, yes, I'll do it. And I'm going to tighten it up, and it's basically what you see right now. 10-minute stories, limited number of tellers, theme. And I also knew that I wanted this to be a long-term event. And I wanted to not have to fight New York City over the name. So the website crashed, and I had nothing to do with that. I didn't have any of the login information at the time. Nick Shantz did, and he said, I don't have time for this. He emailed me all the credentials. I rebuilt the website. Hey, Nick. I wasn't sure if you were here. Thanks for your support, though. Thanks for being here tonight. Nick was one of the guys who told a story at the Badlander, too, so I'm trying to get him back up here someday. Anyway, so I rebuilt the website in a CMS I had no idea how to use. And one thing I knew, like I said, I didn't want to fight New York City, you know, after building something up. And so I linked to themoth.org from my website. And I know that someone at the Moth, that it's their job to look at analytics and figure out where all of this traffic is coming from and when, and all of a sudden they're getting all this traffic from Missoula, Montana. And I get an email from Maggie Sino, and she says, you know, we really need to talk. And then I got a call from Joan, I can't remember what her last name is, but she was the executive director of the Moth at the time. And she said, please call me. And at the time I smoked cigarettes, and so I called her, and I'm chain smoking, so nervous. And she says, you know, you really need to change the name. And I said, I have an event coming up in a couple of weeks, and I've got posters all over town, and that would be really confusing for me to change the name before the event comes, so I can't do it. She's like, you have to do it. I said, then you're going to have to send me a letter. And she said, do you know how much, do you know that we're a nonprofit? And I said, yeah. And she said, you're going to make me get some lawyers? And I said, yeah, because you're a nonprofit, I know how much money you make. So she sent me a cease and desist letter. And the opening night of the time that I took over Missoula Moth, we changed the event and called it Tell Us Something. Because I wanted it to be an inviting name. I wanted people to come and listen to their community share stories. What I didn't want was people to come and listen to some big name share a story, because we do have some big names in Missoula. And I don't want somebody to say, are you going to tell us something tonight? Yes, because Pat Williams is going to share a story, and I love Pat. Are you going to tell us something tonight? No, because, you know, Marc Moss is sharing a story, and that guy's a jerk. No, I wanted to keep it anonymous so that people would come and listen to their community share stories. And that is a huge jump, a huge leap of faith that I was taking with the community to say, are you going to do this? Thank you so much for catching me and for coming out every night. I can't do this without you, and I really, really am in love with you for coming out and listening to each other share stories. Two years ago, I quit my full-time job, my cushy, stable job, to do this full-time. And that is when I stopped looking back. Thank you so much for being here. The last thing I want to say is I try when I'm up here to not have this be about me, because it's not. It's about the storytellers and their stories. Because somebody dropped out tonight, I jumped up, and I got a chance to do something that I really love. And so thanks for giving me that opportunity so much. Thanks, Mark.